Thanks, Claudia. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to session 3 of the Azure DevOps Mini Bootcamp. Just a reminder, if you wanted to follow along with the project as we go through the next few weeks, next couple of months, I guess, the link to the project is down there on the bottom left of the opening slide. The slides will also be posted to the Teams channel. There's only maybe 2 or 3 slides, and then we're going to jump right into demos like usual. Where we are at in our little journey is we're at continuous delivery. So the first session, we focused on source control and Git, and then we did continuous integration last week where we were automating the build process of our application, and now we're moving on to continuous delivery. And with our objectives, I've started to highlight the items in red that we're focusing on and the items in green that we've actually completed so far. So we'll be deploying our .NET Core App Service, and we'll be implementing continuous delivery with pipeline stages and also in classic release pipelines. So we're going to compare the two. Crossed out deployment with delivery because I kept mixing those two terms up. So that was a change to the slide. Just wanted everyone to be aware that was changing. So continuous delivery is what we're focusing on today. And that's the process to build, test, configure, and deploy from a build to a production environment. What that really means is with CD, software releases can be a bottleneck for teams. Manual processes usually lead to unreliable releases that produce delays and errors. And the teams that often rely on handoffs, it usually resulted in issues during their release cycles. Remembering back to our example from a previous session where we were saying traditionally someone would say provide a zip package to an operations team to deploy every time a new build was ready. We want to automate this, and we want to do it in 2 ways. We want to, 1, know that the package is valid and tested. That was our CI. And 2, we want to deploy the package with confidence because we know it's been validated and it's safe to deploy. So we remove that manual process. The automated release pipeline allows what some people tend to refer to as the fail fast approach to validation. And that means that the tests that are more likely to fail quickly are run first, and then the longer running tests are run after the faster ones complete successfully. So the goal of CD is to keep production fresh by achieving the shortest path from the availability of new source in our source control and to deploy it to production. CD minimizes the time to deploy and the time to remediate production incidents as well. Then we're going to be focusing on pipeline stages. This is a new feature in Azure DevOps. It's still in preview, so we're going to build the release pipeline in a classic release, and we're going to then convert it to a YAML-based multi-stage release. We did the same thing with the CI component. We created a classic one, and then we switched over to YAML. Well, now this preview feature lets you put your release into the same YAML definition that you had your build in. Screenshot below is what those stages look like in the new preview feature. Stages are basically just a way to describe the events in your CI/CD process. So in that screenshot, you'll see a build stage, a validate stage, and the deploy stage. And we're going to build all 3 of those. We're going to build the last 2 because we built the first one last session. So let's get right into the demos. We're going to deliver the solutions that we've been working on to Azure using the classic release. Then we're going to recreate it in the YAML multi-stage pipeline, and then we're going to add a validation stage as well. Just switch over my screen here. There we go. And so we're back at our mini bootcamp project that the link was on that first slide. All right, so let's get started. We're going, let's just take a quick look around just as a refresher of what we had. Last time we left off, here was our classic build, our CI process. We had a nice little GUI. We made the tasks for our agent, and we published our artifacts. Then we went and recreated that in a YAML-based build definition, which was not as user-friendly, arguably, but it does still have some UI components to help you kind of piece things together so you don't need to remember this syntax or refer to the documentation every time you want to add a step to your build process. We're going to go over here to releases. We haven't created one yet. This is going to be the classic release. This is going to take our artifacts and do something with it. That something is we're going to take the artifact of our templates, which was an Azure App Service Plan, and the other artifact was our .NET application. We're going to make 2 release tasks to deploy both of those things. So I'm going to start off with an empty one just so we get a view of it from the start. And a reminder, this isn't going away. The new feature does kind of replace the need to have this, but you may run into both, and that's why we're keeping both examples in the demo. So we made those 2 artifacts we had from our build process. Now we want to take those and do something with it. And the first thing we'll do in the release is add an artifact to our release. We're going to pick the project that we made those releases in, and then we're going to pick the CI process that created those artifacts. We're going to choose the YAML-based one. We'll add that, and now what we do with these happens in these stages. So even though we're talking about multi-stage pipelines as a new feature, stages are still a concept in the classic one. It's just the way that you define them differently, and I'll show you those when we switch over. So we're just going to stick with one stage for this example. I'm going to add this in, and we're going to do a Azure resource group deployment. I've got to start with an empty job. And then we're going to add a task to our agent. There we go. This is just a built-in task that's going to let us take some ARM templates and deploy them to an Azure subscription. Choose our subscription. I'm going to authorize it. We'll go over subscription authorization in a little bit as well. So you know how to pre-authorize pipelines in case you're handing this process off to someone who may not have the ability to authorize their subscription. And while that's happening, let's see if this hopefully doesn't cancel it. Go and we'll add a .NET, oh no, app service. I guess I should have waited. All right, we'll go back to this then. So this built-in ARM deployment task is going to let us choose which resource group we want to deploy something to. I'm going to enter one that doesn't exist. So hopefully that will create it when we do the deployment, and we're going to choose our location. This is basically the same thing as running new-AZ resource group deployment. And here's where we reference those artifacts that we linked on the previous screen. We had 2 artifacts. One was the templates artifact, and the other was the zip file that contained our web app. We're just focusing on the app service template deployment right now. So let's choose that template. And we're going to choose our parameter file. These are just 2 quick start templates that deploy these resources. We changed it, I think, to use Linux, and we provided the name of the app service plan in the parameter file. Keep it as incremental mode. And I think that's everything. Yep. So now we're going to add a second task. This thing looks very suspicious with that needing attention, but I don't see where it's asking me. Okay, whatever. If we have to do it again, we'll do it again. So app service is the next task we're going to do. App service deploy. And it's very similar. We're going to choose the subscription that we want. We're going to choose the app service name, which isn't there yet. We'll call it DevOps Mini bootcamp. And the reason why this isn't there is because the task up above it is actually the one that's creating the app service name. So we have to type it in manually here. If we were to run this again after the first job finishes, then it would just show up in the drop down there. I'm going to leave it pretty basic. Still asking. Let's try something else. I'm just going to do this one again because it looks a little suspicious. Drag this up. And fill these in really quickly again. Almost done. One more field. There we go. Awesome. So we're going to save this. And we're going to hit OK. And this will deploy our templates. And then we'll deploy the web app to the app service that we deployed in the previous step. If the first step fails, the second step will, the first task fails, the second task will not run. We get a new button up here to create a release. This will kick it off, but there's also another way that you can create a release, and that's the idea of automating this process. If you see on this artifact, there's a little trigger. If you turn this on, continuous deployment, what will happen is when a new build from our previous build pipeline finishes, it will kick off the stages that are associated with this release pipeline. So we'll do that. I'm not going to spend too much time on actually deploying these because it could take a little bit, maybe a few minutes or so. But just for the sake of it, let's make sure it works. We'll create one. It's asking us which version of the build we want, and this 1024 was from our last session when we made those artifacts. Sounds great. We'll create that, and that should run and hopefully complete successfully. Now, if we were to go back to our source control and edit one of those template files and then save it, we've now created an automated build and a release that detects that a new build was created, and then it deploys it to the Azure subscription. In the next session, we're going to continue on with continuous delivery, where we'll make a lot more complex stages for POC, dev, and production, and we'll be using environments for that, but it'll look a lot cooler than this. But just to give you an idea what it might look like in here, you can add all these stages here, and then sometimes people will like say, this is dev, and they'll go here and say, this is POC. And then you can keep building on, and each of those stages, they won't continue until the previous stage was completed successfully, and you can put in approvers and all sorts of stuff. So we'll get into that later, but just to give everyone an idea of what this looks like when you're using the classic one, let's check out that release. So it was unable to find the parameter file. Maybe I missed something. Oh, yeah, forgot to actually select the file. There we go. And we'll save it and make a new release. All right, let's check it out. These are running on the Microsoft hosted VSTS agents, so there is sometimes a little bit of a delay waiting for them to start, but let's check out how this is going to work. Cool, it's downloading the zip file for the web app. Next up, it looks like we got our templates file, artifact, and then our two tasks that we had in the stage. Let's hop over to the portal. See if we got anything in here. Yep, there we go. We got our new resource group created. And any second now, these should start showing up. Awesome. There's the app service plan. Should be one more. Anyway, while that's going, what we're going to do is show how to do this in the new multi-stage YAML pipelines. You have to turn this on because it's a preview feature. So in the top right next to your name, there's a preview features option. And just one thing to note, if you're looking over on the left side where it says pipelines, this is what's going to change. We have builds, releases. You're going to see some of these icons change. And we're going to turn on multi-stage pipelines. There we go. So builds went away. Now it's just called pipelines because the idea is you're going to be integrating your CI and your CD into that same YAML file. And we have environments, which we'll be talking about next session, to define those POC, dev, UAT, prod, all those environments that we're going to be deploying our web app to. All right, so we still get access to our old classic release pipelines. That's cool, but we're not going to use those right now. We're going to build on the build pipeline that we already had, and we're going to edit it and bring up that familiar YAML file. Great, going to get some extra screen space here. All right, so we got that continuous integration trigger here whenever there's a change to master. We'll make that a little bit more complex later. We're using the Microsoft hosted agent, just the Linux one, the latest version of Ubuntu. This variable, again, next session, we're going to get into a lot more things about variables and optimizing our pipeline YAML file. And these are just two examples that we threw in there just to show a little bit of troubleshooting. So I'm going to get rid of those because we don't need those anymore from last session. And we got our tasks. There's the build for the .NET app and the publishing of the app itself and the publishing of the templates folder. So now that we have the new stages feature, let's implement some of those. Probably going to watch me struggle a bit here, and hopefully that's okay because the syntax for this and it's a little picky for me. I'm still getting used to it. It requires like some very specific indents and everything. So we're going to start off by defining our container for stages. Then we're going to create a stage, and we're going to call it build. Each stage needs jobs. So we're going to make a container for jobs, and then we're going to create our first job. And we're going to call it build and push. So the note about the syntax here is it's required to have a space and a dash between for each item within a container. So there's no dash for the container for stages. There's no dash for jobs, but there is for job and stage. All right, so typing all this stuff out is going to be super tedious. So we're going to use the UI on the left side, and we're going to create exactly what we just did. The first one is, oh no, wait, I'm sorry. We need to put our build into this build stage first, and then we'll start using this. So let me get this out of the way. Right, so we got some steps. Get rid of some of this because it's taking up space. So notice that I'm now getting like a little squiggly line under here. Unexpected property steps. It's probably because it's not indented properly. And it went away. So be aware of that. It was saying unexpected property. property is kind of expected. It's just not expected in that spot, I guess. So indenting is very important. This should define our entire build stage. So that was pretty easy. Now we're going to add in our, let's add in the validation stage first. Dash stage, validation, and this is going to make sure that our templates are okay before we try and deploy them, because sometimes you can deploy a template and there's 80 things in it and 20 of them work and 60 don't, and then you got to go clean up after yourself. So the validation stage we're going to be using is the new AZ resource group deployment, except with the dash mode validation on it. So that's kind of the same thing as when you're in the portal and you're creating something and there's it's validating it before you hit the create button. Same idea. So we're going to make a stage called validation. We will make it depend on the previous stage. That way it doesn't kick off even if it fails. That should be depends on. And it's nice, it tries to help a little bit every once in a while, but I kind of don't depend on it because it's bitten me before. All right, so there's jobs for this one. And the job that we're going to start first is validate template. And the steps, oh, got an indent. All right, so let's do the AZ resource group deployment with validation. So this looks really similar on the left side to what those tasks were in the classic one. So shouldn't be too different. There are a little few annoyances here, but remember it's in preview. We have our subscription that we're authorized for. Creator update resource group is the same. So here's one of the fun things. You can't type in the resource group name in here. Conveniently, the resource group name was here because we created in that previous release. So that's all right, but let's pretend it's not. And we'll just use this second one. And the same thing, you have your linked artifact in your template, but again, a little bit different. You can't browse to it. So it's a little bit frustrating there. You got to know what the paths are. And in one of the previous sessions, we had a link to all the variables and paths that you can reference. So I'm just going to paste these in here. It's the working directory where the artifacts that reside on the agent. And we're going to put our parameter file. Here's where we're going to change this to validation only. We'll make sure our template looks good. Now, here's the tricky part. If you don't have your cursor in the exact right spot, it's going to take everything on the right side and just convert it to YAML and just paste it wherever your cursor was. So we need to make sure it's on this last line. And we'll say add. There we go. It took all the hard work and put it there for us. I think that might be good. Let's see. Validation. We got our build stage. Each has a job. One depends on the other. Cool. Let's see what happens. Oh, and this is the other awesome feature. Why we want to do this in YAML is because now the YAML file is in your pipeline and you get to have commit codes for it, and you get to go through code review to make sure that people are updating the pipelines and they're not just doing it on their own, and everyone's aware of what's happening. So just like with the git commit, this is a commit, so we're going to say what we're doing here, adding validation stage.
Hey, Jobert.
All right, and let's run it. Actually, it should have run automatically. Let's go check it out. All right, we got an error. Pipeline is not valid. This is the authorization issue again. So on the previous classic one, we had to click that authorize button. This happens because we have a new resource being added to an already existing pipeline. I'm going to click authorize resources here, and I'll show you where to change this so you don't have to do this every time. Go into your project settings and service connections. And then somewhere in here, policies maybe. Yeah, allow all pipelines to use a service connection. Again, we'll go over in detail how to make more complex pipelines and authorization or service connections in the next session. So I'm sure in enterprise environments, you're not going to want to click this, but for our sake, it's just easier to click authorize. Well, let's see if it started deploying. We'll run it because we didn't make a change, so it's not going to kick off automatically. Great, there we go. So we got our 2 stages. Expand those to see each job that we defined in our stage. And while this works, let's start adding to our multi-stage Yemma file. Let's add a new stage. We're going to call this one deployment, or let's call it deploy. It doesn't really matter. You can name them whatever you want. And we're going to make this one depend on the previous, which we called validation. Going to add some jobs and add a job to start off. This one we'll call deploy template. This is the going to be pretty much the same as this one, I think. We're just going to change deployment mode from validation to incremental, I believe. Great. We don't want to type all that stuff in again. Add our steps. And let's kick open the wizard again. Same deal. Oh, right. I intentionally chose the wrong resource group name because you can't select it. But the reason why I did that is because once we hit add, even though it wasn't there, and say it wasn't there for you when you're doing your first deployment, it's just a matter of typing it in here once it's over on the left side. I assume at some point you'll be able to just type into that dropdown, but again, it's preview. And we'll choose the same location. And copy these. Our template file and our parameter file. So just to show you what happens if you don't put your cursor in the right spot, notice I have this file highlighted. If I say add, it just screws everything up. So we're going to copy that, reverse it, and then paste it down here. Invalid YAML structure. Something's not indented properly.
It's jobs, Mike.
Yeah, hang in there. I knew this was going to happen. I do this every day, and I'm always indenting them wrong. Great, there we go. And in case you weren't aware, the way I'm indenting is just highlighting them all and hitting tab. I don't have to go into each one. And I got an error. Somehow I pasted an extra quote there. Great. So now we have our build stage, our validation stage, And our deployment stage for the ARM templates, which we just changed validation basically to incremental. Let's see if our previous one finished successfully. Hey, it did. Sweet. All right, let's see if this one works. Save it. We're adding the deployment of ARM templates stage. We have CI enabled. That means we should see new build kickoff automatically there, or release kickoff. There it is. And hey, now we got 3 stages. There's our jobs for the stage, and there's our jobs for the deploy stage. Nice. And let's not wait for that to run. Let's go back to the one more thing that we need to add. Now I need to add the task or the step for the web app deployment. What do we call this one? Let's call it steps, and we'll use the wizard again. Exact same task that we had before. Choose the app service name. Again, this wouldn't be here if we wouldn't have run the previous deployment. So it would be a matter of typing this in manually because the UI doesn't let you. Or of course, you can type it all in manually and use the reference document. That should be enough. We have the package for our app. The artifact is mywebapp.zip. Make sure our cursor's in the right spot. And let's insert it. Nice. Jumping back over, looks like we have a failure on our deployment. Let's click into it and see what it is. Could not find any file matching the template pattern. Oh man, what did we do? This looks okay.
.parameters.json.
Ah, thank you. All right, just so we're doing, yeah, whatever. We'll leave this here too. Adding deployment of web app and correcting the parameter reference. So we have a new release kicking off here. There it is. And while that goes this time, let's go take a look at our repo. We've been editing this file, really. That's all we've been doing is editing the azure-pipelines.yaml file. You notice if you do this in just inside of a code editor, you don't get that helpful settings button. If you do it in this specific UI, we have this settings button here. You can click it up and it'll bring up all the things that you've entered. Now, it's not 100%. There's some times where you click on this and it doesn't give you every field that you've previously entered. Again, it's preview, so you never know, but it's fairly reliable. And if you're ever curious how to create, if you have a classic one that you wanted to convert, we still have that previous releases here. And you can kind of get an idea. It's not 100% on this either. Let's edit it and I'll show you how you can get a quick sample of what your YAML file should look like. Click on your agent task. There's a view YAML button up here. You can see it's giving you everything that you need to paste into there. But of course, this is just trying to help you make sure that all the parameters that you've entered in are actually there. I don't think I have an example of one where it isn't, but yeah, here's one. So we did the Azure App Service deploy it might be because this is just a default parameter, but down here, the package or folder, that is it's a required field, and it doesn't give it to you here. So be aware of what you're copying and pasting. It may not be 100%. But just to nail that point home about why you want to be doing this in YAML is because now we have the history. So not only do we have the change that we were making to our regular, again, regular might be the wrong word, but our other code, we've been updating the YAML file, and we can see what the differences are each time. Whereas before you had to dig a little bit to get into this, and it wasn't monitored in source control. Great, let's see how our release is going. And it failed. But our template deployed. That's awesome. Let's see what happened. Yes, and I'm glad we got this error, because this is going to be what our homework is. Let's review this, and we'll go over it one more time really quick, just to show everything that happened start to finish. We got the build. It has all the regular jobs that we had in the classic one. We published our build. We ran .NET build for our web app. There's the 2 artifacts. Cleans up. We go to our validation stage. It's running the AZ resource group deployment with the validation mode. That one's done. Now we deploy our template. Awesome. And now we deploy our web app, which the error is saying no package found with a specified pattern. It's looking for this path and a zip file in it. That path /home/bsts/work/1/s is this. Again, if you need to reference that, there's a link probably at the end of this slide presentation as well, where you can see what all these directories are, because you notice there might be some different ones, like build artifact staging directory, and I think this one's like not an easy to remember path. It's like /home/bsts/1/a, something like that. So sometimes you have to look it up. So that's what this is looking for, a zip file here. There should be an app that we've referenced. We got the artifact up here, my web app. There's the path, but it's saying that it can't find it. Just for some troubleshooting, because this is going to be part of the homework, say you don't know where these folders are, what these folders are, and you want to like just browse around and see what's inside the file system of the agent that's running your tasks. Under the steps of a job, you can execute PowerShell, bash, or I know you can do batch files, but I never do. I don't remember what it is. I thought it was like batch, but whatever. We're going to execute a PowerShell command. And we can just say get child item. And we'll recurse through it. Like this. And actually, let's move this up one, because it won't run since this task didn't finish successfully. So we'll put it at the, where should we put it? We'll put it after the ARM template deployment. This is just a way to troubleshoot. It's not necessary, but it might help you with the homework. Save it. Adding PowerShell inline script to test. All right, so while that's running, let's go over what we're going to be doing over the next week that we'll review next Thursday in the homework session. 1 second, got to switch screens. All right, so the next session, next Thursday, we'll go over the homework. And then the next actual non-homework session is going to be continuous delivery continued. We'll be going over environments, so we'll be making different stages for POC, dev, I don't know, however many we want. We'll just go over that just to show how to have different parameters for each environment. And so you can automatically progress your deployment from each stage with as little intervention as possible. So we'll be using approvals. Then we'll be converting our build artifacts that we just got to know and love. We're going to convert those to Azure artifacts using the Azure Artifacts feature in DevOps. I'll show you what I'm talking about right down here. So this artifacts feature, I don't think I have any listed. Oh, these are from a different project, but we'll make an artifacts feed and we'll start publishing those there. That way you can get some nice versioning on all those build artifacts you've been creating. And then we're going to parameterize and generalize our YAML definitions, because looking at this, let's see, kind of looks long, and it has what some people call code smell, where you got like the same thing written all over the place, that in multiple spots. So we'll start using variables and we'll start using includes of other YAML files that will make this more generalized so that you can start using the same YAML files for all of your projects, or hopefully a lot of them anyway. Cool. Let's go check out that release. Hopefully it failed by now. Oh, it's getting there. Hey, cool. All right, it failed. Same thing, but we want to troubleshoot this. We want to figure out why it can't find the zip file. We have that artifact. It's a zip file. We know it's there because we see it right here. Right here? Yeah, right here. So we know the artifact exists, but the troubleshooting step we added in under the deploy job is a PowerShell script. And it was just that get child item, and we pasted that directly where we thought it was going to be, and it outputted what is in there. So inside here is just a recursive listing of it, but I don't see a zip file. Fun. So the homework is to take what we've been working on. You got your YAML file. You're going to turn on the preview features for multi-stage YAML and create a release or add a release to that file that you've already created. And the second homework task is to fix the bug. We're going to find out why it can't find that zip file. And that's pretty much it for this session. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Can I have a question, please?
Please go for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is my first time to attend the session. Claudia invited me. If there is any permission over this project, so someone can add me if there is any kind of permission?
No, there's not.
Or,
If you go right to this address in the bottom left, whoops, dev.azure.com/ all that stuff, it's open to the public. Anybody can see it. No login required.
okay. So okay. Yeah. And is it possible to troubleshoot? Just a question.